Don't talk to that old hag." The words hit me like a slap, loud, sharp, and impossible to ignore. My daughter-in-law, Courtney, stood there in the middle of my grandson, Ethan's birthday party, her voice dripping with disgust as every guest turned to stare at me. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. But instead, I reached into my purse. And I called the police. Not because of what she said, but because of what she had already done. And this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own family, I want you to stay with me. Like this video, subscribe. If stories like this speak to you, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? I wasn't always the kind of woman who sat quietly in the corner of someone else's home, second-guessing whether I had the right to speak. There was a time when this voice of mine filled classrooms. For 32 years, I was a middle school librarian in Columbus, Ohio. I knew every child by name, every shy reader who needed encouragement, every restless boy who just needed the right story to feel seen. I had a rhythm to my days, a purpose that made waking up each morning feel steady and meaningful. And for most of my life, I had my husband David. David Mitchell wasn't a loud man, but he was solid in a way that made everything feel safe. He fixed things before they broke, remembered birthdays without reminders, and never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough. After Ryan was born, David used to say, "No matter how big he gets, Leah, this house is yours as much as it is mine. You built this family just as much as I did." I believed him. Maybe that's why losing him felt like the ground itself had shifted beneath me. It happened quietly, too quietly. One winter morning, just over 2 years ago, David didn't wake up. No warning, no long goodbye, just silence. The house we had lived in for nearly 4 decades suddenly felt too large, too still. Every room held echoes. His chair by the window, his coffee mug in the cabinet, the creak in the hallway floor he always promised to fix. I learned how loud loneliness could be. For a while, I told myself I was managing. I kept my routines. I went to church every Sunday. I called my friend Gloria at least twice a week. I even started volunteering at the library part-time again. But then came the fall. It wasn't dramatic. No ambulance, no broken bones. I slipped on a patch of ice just outside my front porch and landed hard on my hip. I lay there for a few minutes, staring up at the gray Ohio sky, feeling something deeper than pain settle into my chest. It wasn't the fall that scared me. It was the thought, what if no one had found me? Ryan found out the next day. I hadn't even told him myself. Gloria had mentioned it when she ran into him at the grocery store. That evening, my phone rang. "Mom, why didn't you tell me you fell?" Ryan's voice was tight, sharper than usual. "I'm fine," I told him. "It was nothing, just a little slip." "That's not nothing," he insisted. "You could have hit your head. You live out there all alone. What if something worse happens next time?" There it was again, that word, alone. "I've lived here for years, Ryan," I said gently. "I know how to take care of myself." There was a pause on the line. Then his tone shifted softer, almost pleading. "Mom, just come stay with us for a while. Not forever, just until we know you're okay." I hesitated. I could picture my house, even as we spoke, the lace curtains I had picked out myself, the bookshelf David built by hand, the kitchen where every holiday meal had been made. Leaving it even temporarily felt like stepping away from a part of my life I wasn't ready to let go of. "I don't want to be a burden," I said quietly. "You're not a burden," Ryan replied immediately. "You're my mother." That should have comforted me, and part of me wanted to believe it completely. "Courtney won't mind," I asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. "No," he said. She'll understand. It's family." That was the first moment something inside me stirred, just a faint flicker of uncertainty. But I pushed it down, because I wanted to believe my son, because I wanted to believe that family still meant what it used to. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of boxes, decisions, and quiet goodbyes. I didn't sell my house, that felt too final, but I packed up what I thought I'd need. Clothes, medications, a few framed photographs, and a small wooden box filled with keepsakes letters David had written me. Over the years, Ryan's childhood drawings, a pressed flower from our 25th anniversary, the things that mattered. Gloria stood by the door the day I left, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. You call me every day, she said, trying to sound firm but failing to hide the worry in her eyes. I will, I promised. And if something doesn't feel right, she added, lowering her voice, you come back here. No questions asked. I smiled at her, touched by her concern. It's my son's home, Gloria, I said. I'll be fine. I wish I'd listened more carefully to the hesitation in her silence. Ryan's house was in a newer subdivision on the edge of Columbus. Clean lines, neat lawns, everything looking just a little too perfect. Courtney had decorated it in what she once called a modern transitional style, which seemed to mean that nothing looked lived in. When I arrived, she greeted me at the door with a bright smile. Leah, you made it, she said, leaning in for a quick, light hug that didn't quite reach her eyes. Let me help you with your bags. Her voice was warm, polite, practiced. Thank you for having me, I said. Of course, she replied smoothly. We're happy to help. Ryan came down the stairs a moment later, pulling me into a real embrace. It's good to have you here, Mom, he said. For a brief moment standing there between them, I let myself feel relief. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe I wouldn't be alone anymore. That first evening, everything seemed almost normal. Courtney had prepared dinner. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a salad arranged so carefully it looked like something from a magazine. Ethan sat across from me, swinging his legs under the table, grinning as he told me about his school science project. I laughed. I listened. I tried to settle into this new version of my life. But small things began to stand out. Courtney watched me closely as I reached for salt, as if measuring how much I used. She corrected Ethan when he interrupted me, but not in a gentle way, more like she was performing for someone. And when I mentioned that I usually had tea before bed, she said, "Oh, we try not to have caffeine too late in this house. It can interfere with sleep at your age." At your age. The words were light, almost casual, but they lingered. Later that night, as I unpacked in the guest room, I noticed that Courtney had already arranged some of my things before I arrived. My medications were lined up neatly on the dresser. My paperwork, insurance prescriptions, even my mail had been stacked in a small pile on the desk. "I just wanted to make things easier for you," she said from the doorway, her tone pleasant. "Thank you," I replied, though something about it made my chest tighten. She stepped further into the room, glancing over the documents. "Do you keep track of all this yourself?" she asked. "It can get confusing. A lot of older people end up needing help managing things." "I've been managing just fine," I said, keeping my voice even. "Of course," she said quickly, smiling again. "I just mean if you ever need assistance, Ryan and I are here, Ryan and I." I nodded, though I didn't answer. That night, lying in a bed that didn't smell like home, I stared at the ceiling long after the house had gone quiet. I told myself I was just adjusting, that it was normal to feel out of place in a new environment, that Courtney's comments didn't mean anything, but deep down there was a small, persistent feeling I couldn't ignore. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was something quieter, something like being watched, and I didn't know then just how carefully I already was. At first I told myself I just needed time to adjust to a different house, a different rhythm, a different way of doing things. After all, I wasn't the one running this home anymore. Courtney was. And whether I liked her methods or not, I tried to remind myself that I was a guest here, but it didn't take long before I realized this wasn't about adjustment. It was about position. And mine, in Courtney's eyes, was somewhere between an inconvenience and a problem she intended to solve. It started small. Always small enough that if I questioned it, I could be made to feel like I was overreacting. One morning, I came into the kitchen wearing a soft blue cardigan I had owned for years, one of my favorites. David used to say it brought out the color in my eyes. Courtney looked up from her phone, her gaze sweeping over me. "Are you going to wear that?" she asked. I paused, confused. "Yes." "Why?" She tilted her head slightly as if considering how honest to be. "It just looks a little dated," she said. "I mean, if we're going out later, I could lend you something more current." "More current," I smiled politely. "I'm comfortable in this," of course she replied quickly, but there was something in her tone, something faintly disapproving, like I had failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Ryan didn't say a word. That became a pattern. At dinner, Courtney would comment on how much salt I added. "That's a lot for someone your age," she said once, laughing lightly as if it were a joke. When I tried to help clean up, she would take the dish from my hands. "It's okay, Leah, you might drop it," she said, smiling in that same careful way. When I spoke to Ethan about his homework, she would interrupt. "We're trying a different method with him," she'd say. "It's more structured." Everything I did was gently corrected, redirected, replaced. Not loudly, not openly hostile, but consistently. And always in a way that made it difficult to object without sounding ungrateful. Ryan saw it. I know he did. There were moments, brief flickering moments, when his expression shifted. When Courtney would say something just a little too sharp, and I would catch him watching me as if waiting for a reaction. But he never stepped in. Not once. "Courtney just likes things a certain way," he told me one evening when I mentioned it quietly. "She doesn't mean anything by it." I nodded, even though something inside me tightened. Because meaning doesn't always need to be spoken out loud. Sometimes it's in the repetition. And the repetition was wearing me down. Then there were the jokes. Courtney had a way of saying things that hovered right on the edge of humor, but never quite landed there. One afternoon, while I was reading in the living room, she walked in carrying a basket of laundry. "Careful not to fall asleep sitting up," she said with a light laugh. "My grandmother used to do that all the time. It's like once you hit a certain age, your body just gives up whenever it wants." I looked up at her. "I'm not that old, Courtney." She smiled unfazed. "Of course not. I just mean, it happens." Another time, when I misplaced my reading glasses for a few minutes, she chuckled. "See, this is what I keep telling Ryan," she said. "Little things like this. It's how it starts." "How what starts?" I asked. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, nothing serious, just memory decline. Totally normal, totally normal." I began to notice how often she used words like that. Normal, typical, expected, as if she were quietly building a narrative, one that didn't include me as I actually was. Ryan still said nothing. But what unsettled me more than Courtney's words was what started happening behind the scenes. The first time I noticed something off it was my mail. I had always been particular about it. Bills, statements, letters. I opened everything myself, sorted it, filed it away. It was a habit from years of keeping our household organized. But one afternoon I found an envelope already slit open sitting neatly on the desk in the guest room. I frowned picking it up. It was a bank statement. I didn't remember opening it. Maybe I had and simply forgot I told myself. That thought lingered longer than I liked. A few days later it happened again. This time it was a letter from my insurance provider, opened, stacked, too neatly. I walked into the kitchen holding it in my hand. "Did either of you open my mail?" I asked. Ryan looked up from his laptop. "No, why?" Courtney glanced over, her expression calm. "Oh, I might have," she said casually. "It was mixed in with ours. I just opened it without checking." I stared at her. "You read it?" She shrugged slightly. "Just the first page. It didn't look important. It didn't look important." Something in me stirred, then not anger, not yet, but a quiet sense of violation. "I prefer to handle my own mail," I said carefully. "Of course," she replied, smiling. "I was just trying to help. Always helping, always stepping just a little too far." I started keeping my documents closer after that, but it didn't stop. One evening, as I passed through the hallway, I heard my name. I hadn't meant to listen, but something in Courtney's tone made me pause. "We should really think about getting things organized sooner rather than later," she was saying. "Organized." I stood still, just out of sight. Ryan's voice came next, quieter. "I know, but what?" Courtney cut in. "Ryan, this isn't optional. If something happens and nothing's in place, it's going to be a mess. You've seen how she handles things." My chest tightened. "Handles things? I just don't want to rush her," Ryan said. "She just got here." "That's exactly why we need to act now," Courtney replied. "While she's still agreeable. The words settled over me like a shadow. There was a pause. Then Courtney lowered her voice slightly, but not enough. "Have you even asked her about adding you to her account?" she said. I froze. Ryan didn't answer immediately. "I don't know how to bring that up," he admitted. "It's not that complicated," Courtney said. "You frame it as safety, emergency access. Everyone does it. My grip tightened on the edge of the wall. "She trusts you," Courtney continued. "You just have to guide her in the right direction." Guide her. That was the word she chose. Not ask, not discuss. Guide. I stepped back slowly, my heart beating louder than I wanted to admit. I walked into the kitchen a moment later, forcing my expression into something neutral. Courtney looked up immediately, her smile appearing as if on cue. "There you are," she said. "I was just about to make tea." I nodded, setting the letter down on the counter. "Actually," she added, tilting her head slightly, "there's something I wanted to ask you." I met her eyes. "What is it?" She leaned casually against the counter, her tone light, almost conversational. "Have you ever considered adding Ryan to your bank account?" she asked. "Just in case of emergencies. It would make things so much easier if something unexpected happened." There it was. Not overheard this time. Spoken directly. I kept my face still, even as something inside me shifted slowly, deliberately, like a door closing. "I've managed my accounts for years," I said. "Of course," she replied quickly. "You've done an amazing job. I just mean, things change. It's always better to plan ahead, plan ahead." I smiled faintly. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I'm asking," she said, her eyes lingering on me just a second too long. Ryan stayed silent. Again. And that was the moment something inside me settled into place. Not fear, not confusion, something clearer than that. Awareness. Because this wasn't kindness, it wasn't concern, and it certainly wasn't accidental. Courtney wasn't just correcting me. She was positioning herself, and Ryan was letting her. I went to bed that night with a quiet certainty I couldn't ignore anymore. Whatever was happening in that house, it was only just beginning. I didn't go back to my house right away. For a few days after that conversation in the kitchen, I stayed exactly where Courtney seemed to want me. Quiet, agreeable, predictable. I made my tea when she said it was fine, ate what she served, smiled when expected. If she was watching me, I wasn't going to give her anything she could twist into proof of decline. But inside, something had changed. I was paying attention now. Every word, every glance, every moment Ryan chose silence over truth. And then one morning, I told them I needed to pick up a few things from my house. Courtney's reaction came a fraction too quickly. "Oh, you don't have to rush," that she said, setting her coffee down. "We can go together this weekend. I've actually been meaning to help you sort through things." Sort through things. I held her gaze. "I won't be long," I said calmly. "Just a couple of items I forgot." Ryan looked between us, his expression unreadable. "Do you want me to come with you, Mom?" he asked. "No," I said gently. "I'll be fine." There was a moment, just a flicker, where Courtney's smile tightened. But then it returned. "All right," she said. "Just be careful. Careful." I nodded, grabbed my coat, and left before either of them could say anything else. The drive felt longer than usual. Maybe because I wasn't just going back to a house. I was going back to something I needed to confirm. Or maybe something I was already afraid I knew. When I pulled into my driveway, everything looked the same. The same white siding, the same maple tree David had planted 20 years ago, the same porch where we used to sit in the evenings watching the neighborhood settle into quiet. For a brief moment I felt foolish. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe grief change and Courtney's behavior had simply made me overly sensitive. But the moment I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I knew. It wasn't anything obvious. That's what made it worse. The air felt disturbed. Subtly, like a room that had been entered and carefully put back together by someone who didn't quite understand what belonged where. I closed the door slowly behind me. "Hello," I called out, though I knew no one would answer. Silence. I set my purse down on the entry table and walked into the living room. At first glance, everything seemed untouched. The couch was in place, the throw blanket neatly folded, the framed photographs exactly where I had left them. But then I noticed it. The remote control. It was angled differently, a small thing. So small, most people wouldn't even register it. But I did. Because I always left it straight. I moved further inside, my steps slow, deliberate. The bookshelf. David's bookshelf. The one he built himself. I ran my fingers along the edge of it. One of the books, an old hardcover we rarely touched, was pushed slightly further back than the others. I pulled it forward. Dust had been disturbed. Someone had been here. My heart began to beat faster, not in panic, but in a cold, steady rhythm. I turned toward the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I was certain I had closed it before I left. I pushed it open. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The bed was made, the pillows aligned, the dresser clear, but when I stepped closer, I saw it. My jewelry box. It was on the dresser exactly where I had left it, but the lid was turned. Not open, not closed, just slightly misaligned, enough for someone who knew it intimately to notice. I reached out slowly and lifted it. Inside, everything appeared untouched. My wedding ring, my earrings, the small gold bracelet David gave me on our 10th anniversary, all there. But beneath the tray where I kept a few personal documents folded carefully away, something was off. I lifted the tray. The papers were slightly shifted, not removed, not taken, but disturbed. My breath caught. They hadn't stolen anything. They had looked. I set the box down gently, my hands steady, despite the tightening in my chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I moved quickly now, my mind sharper, more focused. The file cabinet. I knelt beside it and pulled open the drawer. My folders were labeled neatly insurance, property, banking, legal. Everything seemed in place. Until I reached the back, the property folder. It wasn't where I left it. It was one slot off, just one, but enough. I pulled it out and opened it. The documents were there, but they had been handled, edges slightly bent, pages not aligned the way I always kept them. I sat back on my heels, staring at the folder. They were searching, not stealing, not yet, but preparing. A chill moved through me, not the kind that makes you panic, but the kind that sharpens your thinking. Because now there was no doubt. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about concern. This was about control. I stood slowly closing the cabinet, and then I heard it. A memory. Not from the house, from Courtney. Once everything is signed, she won't have control anymore. The words echoed in my mind clearer now than when I had first overheard them. At the time I had questioned whether I misunderstood. Now I knew I hadn't. I moved back into the living room, my thoughts racing. What exactly were they trying to have me sign? And more importantly, how far had they already gone? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. For a moment I considered calling Ryan, asking him directly, giving him one last chance to explain, but the image of him standing in that kitchen silent while Courtney spoke about guiding me stopped me. No. If I called him now, he would deny it. Or worse, he would warn her. Instead, I scrolled to another name. Gloria. She picked up on the second ring. Well, look who finally decided to call me, she said, her voice warm but edged with concern. How are you holding up over there? I swallowed, looking around the room that had once felt like the safest place in the world. Gloria, I said quietly, has anyone been here? There was a pause. A long one. Too long. Why would you ask that? She replied carefully. Please, I said, just tell me. Another pause. And then her voice dropped. Leah, I didn't want to upset you, she said, but yes, my grip tightened on the phone. Who I saw Courtney here last week, Gloria said slowly. She had a key, said she needed to organize a few things. My chest tightened. Was she alone? No, Gloria said. Ryan was with her. They were carrying a folder, looked like paperwork. I closed my eyes. That was it. That was the moment the last piece fell into place. They stayed for a while. Gloria continued. I thought maybe you had asked them to check on the house. No, I whispered. Silence settled between us. Then Gloria spoke again, her voice firm now. Leah, something doesn't feel right about this. I opened my eyes, staring at the room around me, the room that no longer felt untouched. You're right, I said. And for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't uncertain. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even afraid. I was sure. Whatever Ryan and Courtney were planning, it had already begun. I didn't leave my house right away after speaking with Gloria. For a long moment, I stood in the middle of my living room, my phone still in my hand, my eyes drifting slowly across the space that had once been my refuge. It looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. That was the part no one ever talks about, how betrayal doesn't always show itself in broken locks or missing valuables. Sometimes it lingers in the smallest shifts, in the quiet knowledge that someone you trusted has crossed a line you never imagined they would. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. Across the street, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove's porch sat empty, just like always this time of day. Everything in the neighborhood looked peaceful, normal. But I knew now that what was happening wasn't normal. And more importantly, it wasn't finished. I took a slow breath and forced myself to think clearly. If Courtney and Ryan had already been here, if they had gone through my documents, then I needed to know how far they'd gone. Not what I feared, what was real. I grabbed my purse, locked the door carefully behind me, and headed straight to the bank. The drive felt sharper this time, my thoughts lining up in a way they hadn't before. There was no more confusion clouding things, no more excuses forming in the back of my mind for Ryan. Only questions, and I intended to get answers. The bank was quiet when I walked in. Soft carpet, low voices, the same familiar scent of paper and polish. I had been coming here for years. Some of the staff even recognized me by name. Mrs. Mitchell, a young woman behind the counter, said with a polite smile, "How can we help you today?" "I'd like to review my accounts," I said. "All of them." She nodded. "Of course. Let me get someone to assist you." A few minutes later, I was seated across from a woman I hadn't met before. She looked to be in her early 30s with calm eyes and a professional but approachable demeanor. "I'm Sophie Reed," she said, extending her hand. "I understand you'd like to go over your account activity?" "Yes," I replied, shaking her hand. "I just want to make sure everything is in order." She gave me a small, reassuring smile. "Of course. That's always a good idea." She turned her screen slightly and began pulling up my information. At first, everything looked normal. Balances were where I expected them to be. No large withdrawals, no suspicious transfers. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe they hadn't gotten that far. Maybe I had caught things early enough. But then Sophie's expression changed. It was subtle, just a slight narrowing of her eyes as she scrolled. "Is everything all right?" I asked. She hesitated. "Well," she said carefully, "there have been a few recent inquiries on your account." My stomach tightened. "What kind of inquiries?" She clicked something on her screen. "Requests regarding authorized access," she said, "specifically adding an additional account holder or granting power of attorney." The room seemed to still around me. "I didn't make those requests," I said. "I understand," she replied gently. "That's why I wanted to confirm with you. How were these requests made?" I asked, my voice steady despite the weight pressing against my chest. "Some were initiated online," she said. "Others appear to have been discussed in person." "In person," I repeated. She nodded slowly. "Yes. There's a note here indicating that someone came in asking about the process, on your behalf." My fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the desk. "Do you know who I asked?" Sophie hesitated again, clearly choosing her words with care. "I can't disclose specific details without verifying identity," she said. "But I can tell you this: whoever made the inquiry had enough information to appear credible. That word sent a chill through me, because it meant they hadn't just guessed. They knew things, personal things. "I'd like to secure my accounts," I said. Her expression immediately shifted to one of quiet approval. "Of course," she said. "We can place additional protections, alerts, restrictions, and verification requirements. I want everything locked down," I added. "No changes without my direct approval. In person." "Understood," she said, already typing. As she worked, I felt something inside me settle. Not comfort, not exactly, but a kind of clarity. This was real, not imagined, not exaggerated, planned. When she finished, she looked back at me. "There's one more thing," she said. My chest tightened again. "What is it?" She turned the screen slightly toward me. "There was also an inquiry about beneficiary updates," she said. "It wasn't completed, but someone asked about changing who would inherit funds in the event of—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "In the event of my death," I said quietly. She nodded, yes. For a moment I couldn't speak, because that crossed a line that wasn't just about money, it was about erasing me, rewriting what I had built. "Did they succeed?" I asked finally. "No," Sophie said firmly. "Nothing has been changed. Everything is still exactly as you said it." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Good," I said. But even as relief flickered through me, it was quickly replaced by something colder. Because now, I knew. They hadn't taken anything yet, but they were trying, and they were getting closer. Sophie studied me for a moment before speaking again. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said gently, "if you don't mind me asking, is there someone who may be trying to access your accounts without your permission?" I met her eyes, and for the first time I didn't soften the truth. "Yes," I said. She nodded slowly, her expression serious now. "Then you're doing the right thing by coming in," she said. "And if anything else happens, anything at all, you come back here immediately. We'll help you document it." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it, because in that moment she wasn't just a bank employee. She was a witness. I left the bank with my documents in order my account secured, and my illusions completely gone. The drive back to Ryan's house felt different this time. Heavier, but also clearer. I wasn't walking back into uncertainty anymore. I was walking back into something I understood, a situation that required caution, strategy, and patience. Because confronting them now without everything in place would only give them time to adjust, to cover their tracks, to turn the story against me. No, if I was going to face them, I needed to be ready. Completely ready. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment before getting out. The house looked just as it had that morning. Neat, orderly, deceptively calm. Inside, I found Courtney in the kitchen arranging something on the counter. She looked up as I entered. "Oh, you're back," she said brightly. "Did you get everything you needed?" I set my purse down slowly. "Yes," I said. She studied my face for a second, just long enough to make me aware that she was looking for something. A reaction, a crack. I gave her nothing. "Good," she said, turning back to what she was doing. "We're having guests this weekend, so things might be a little busy." "Of course," I replied. Ryan came in a moment later, glancing between us. "How was the house?" he asked. I met his eyes. "It was fine," I said. He nodded, but something in his expression flickered unease maybe. Good, let him feel it. Because I was done being the only one who sensed something was wrong. That night as I lay in bed, I replayed everything in my mind. The opened mail, the shifted documents, Gloria's confirmation, the bank inquiries. Each piece fit together now. Not perfectly, but clearly enough. They weren't just testing boundaries anymore. They were building something structured, something intentional. And whatever it wasn't going to stop on its own. I stared up at the ceiling, my thoughts steady focused. If they wanted to play this carefully, then so would I. Because the next move wouldn't be theirs. It would be mine. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to slow down. Every detail I had ignored before now lined itself up with unsettling clarity. Courtney's comments, the opened mail, the visit to my house, the bank inquiries, even Ryan's silence, it all formed a pattern I could no longer dismiss. And once you see a pattern like that, you can't unsee it. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. Because confrontation without preparation would only give them the advantage. They would deny, deflect, twist the situation until I became the confused one, the emotional one, the unreliable narrator of my own life. No. If I wanted the truth to stand, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. After breakfast, I told Courtney I was going out to run errands. "Do you want me to come with you?" She asked, her tone light but her eyes attentive. "No," I said gently. "It's just a few things." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "All right, don't overdo it, overdo it." I nodded, grabbed my purse, and left. But I wasn't running errands. I was going to see someone Pastor Elaine had mentioned to me months ago, back when everything in my life had still felt steady. An attorney. His name was Michael Grant. His office was in a modest brick building not far from downtown Columbus. Nothing flashy. No large signs or glass doors. Just a simple plaque by the entrance. Grant and Associates Elder Law. I sat in my car for a moment before going in, steadying myself. This wasn't something I ever thought I would need, legal protection from my own family. But here I was. Inside the office was quiet, almost comforting. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with thick volumes of legal texts. A receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and asked me to wait. A few minutes later, a man in his early 60s stepped out of his office. "Mrs. Mitchell," he asked. I stood. "Yes." "I'm Michael Grant," he said, extending his hand. "Please come in." His office was warm, orderly, and surprisingly calm. "Tell me what's going on," he said once we were seated. And so, I did. Not all at once, but carefully, piece by piece. I told him about David, about moving in with Ryan and Courtney, about the comments, the control the mail, the bank inquiries, the visit to my house. I even repeated the words I had overheard. Once everything is signed, she won't have control anymore. Michael didn't interrupt. He listened. Really listened. When I finished, he leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You've done something very important already," he said. I frowned slightly. "What's that?" "You paid attention," he replied. "Most people dismiss early warning signs. By the time they come to me, the damage is already done." A quiet chill moved through me. "How close am I to that point?" I asked. He held my gaze. "Closer than you should be," he said honestly, "but not past it." I nodded slowly. "What do I do?" I asked. He folded his hands on the desk. "You do not confront them," he said immediately. Relief flickered through me. "I wasn't planning to," I admitted. "Good," he said. "Because if they're already attempting to access your accounts and documents, confrontation will only push them to move faster or cover their tracks." That matched exactly what I had been thinking. "So what do I do instead?" I asked. "You document everything he said, every conversation, every incident, dates, times, details, even things that seem small." I nodded. "I can do that. You also secure your assets." He continued. "Bank accounts, property records, legal documents, anything that could be altered or used against you." "I've already started with the bank," I said. He gave a small nod of approval. "Good," he said. "We'll also want to review your will, your power of attorney, and any medical directives." I felt my chest tighten slightly. "They were asking about power of attorney," I said. "That doesn't surprise me," he replied. "It's one of the most common ways people gain control." The word control echoed in my mind again. "And there's one more thing," he added. "What is it?" "Evidence," he said. I leaned forward slightly. "What kind of evidence?" "Proof of behavior," he said. "Not just what you've experienced, but what they're actually doing." I thought of my house, of the shifted documents. "They've already been inside my home," I said. "I'm sure of it." "Then we confirm it," he said. "How?" He paused for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Install cameras," he said, discreetly, "inside your home. Focus on areas where documents are kept." I blinked. "Cameras, yes," he said. "If they return, and based on what you've told me, they likely will, you'll have proof of unauthorized entry and intent." My heart beat a little faster. Not from fear, but from the realization of what that meant. "They won't expect that," I said. "No," he agreed. "They won't." Silence settled between us for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind. "What if I'm wrong?" I said. He didn't hesitate. "Then you've protected yourself unnecessarily," he said, "and nothing is lost." He leaned forward slightly. "But if you're right, and you do nothing." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. When I left his office, I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel relieved. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Grounded, clear. Because now, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. That afternoon, I made a quiet stop at a small electronics store. I asked simple questions. Nothing too detailed, just enough to understand what I needed. By evening, I had everything. Small cameras, discreet, easy to install. No one would notice them unless they were looking very carefully. And Courtney wasn't the kind of person who expected to be watched. That night, after Ryan and Courtney had gone to bed, I sat at the small desk in the guest room. I opened a notebook, and I began to write. Dates, events, conversations, every detail I could remember, even the smallest things. Because Michael was right. Patterns are built from details, and I was going to capture every single one. Then slowly, deliberately, I began to plan my next move. Not loudly, not dramatically, but carefully, because whatever Courtney and Ryan were building, I was about to start building something too, and mine would be stronger. The next morning, I woke up earlier than everyone else. For a moment, I lay still listening. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to comfort me. Now it felt different, not threatening, but watchful, as if every wall held a conversation I hadn't been invited into. I sat up slowly, careful not to make noise, and reached for the small notebook I had started the night before. I flipped it open. Dates, times, words. I added another line. Decision made. Observe, do not confront. Then I closed it and tucked it neatly into my purse. From that moment on, everything I did had intention. Not fear, not reaction, intention. Downstairs, Courtney was already in the kitchen. Of course she was. She always seemed to be one step ahead of the day. "Good morning," she said brightly, not looking up from the counter as she sliced fruit into perfect, even pieces. "You're up early." "So are you," I replied. She smiled faintly. "I like to stay on top of things." I nodded. "I can see that." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but not quite easy either. I poured myself a cup of coffee, moving slowly, deliberately. I let my hands linger just a little too long on the cabinet, as if I needed to think about what I was doing. Courtney noticed. She always noticed. "Did you sleep all right?" she asked, glancing at me now. "Oh. I think so," I said, furrowing my brow slightly. I woke up once or twice, but I can't quite remember why. It was subtle, barely anything at all, but I saw it the shift in her expression. Interest. "Memory can be tricky," she said lightly, "especially with changes in routine." I gave a small, uncertain smile. "Yes, I suppose it can." That was the moment I knew. She was watching for signs, and I was going to give her exactly what she expected to see. Ryan came in a few minutes later, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he mumbled. "Good morning," I said warmly. Courtney placed a plate in front of him. "You've got that meeting today, remember?" she said. "Don't be late." "I won't," he replied. He glanced at me briefly. "You doing okay, Mom?" I held his gaze for just a second longer than usual. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm fine." He nodded, but there was something in his eyes. Not guilt, not fully, but unease. Good. Let it grow. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I moved slower than usual. I paused before answering simple questions. I let myself appear just slightly uncertain, just slightly forgetful, not enough to be obvious, just enough to confirm what Courtney already believed or wanted to believe. By midday, I told them I was going out again. "More errands?" Courtney asked. "Yes," I said. "I keep forgetting things." She smiled. "Take your time, take your time." I almost laughed at how easily she accepted it, but instead I nodded and left. This time I went straight to my house. The cameras were still in my bag. I locked the door behind me and stood still for a moment listening. Silence. Good. I moved quickly. Not rushed, but efficient. Michael's words echoed in my mind discreetly. Focus on areas that matter. I started in the living room. One small camera tucked behind a decorative frame on the bookshelf angled just right to capture the entire space. Then the hallway. Another one positioned near the entryway where anyone coming in would pass. Finally, the bedroom. This one took longer. I stood in front of the dresser considering. Where would someone go first? The jewelry box, the drawers, the file cabinet. I placed the camera high near the corner of the room, partially hidden by the edge of a shelf. From there, it could see everything. I stepped back, scanning the room carefully. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing obvious. Perfect. When I finished, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands resting lightly in my lap. For the first time since all of this began, I felt something close to control. Not over them, but over myself. Because I wasn't guessing anymore. I was watching. I left the house exactly as I had found it. No signs of disturbance, no indication that anything had changed. Then I drove back. By the time I returned to Ryan's house, the afternoon light had softened, casting long shadows across the driveway. Inside, Courtney was in the living room flipping through a magazine. She looked up as I entered. "There you are," she said. "I was starting to wonder if you got lost." I gave a small apologetic laugh. "I almost did," I said. I took a wrong turn and couldn't remember which street led back. Again subtle, again intentional. Her eyes sharpened just for a moment. Then she smiled. "It happens," she said, "more often than people think. Ryan wasn't home yet." That gave her space, and I realized something important in that moment. Courtney was more open when Ryan wasn't around, more honest in her tone, more herself. "Did you manage to get everything done?" she asked. "I think so," I said, setting my purse down. Although I might have forgotten something. She tilted her head. "What kind of thing, oh?" "I don't know," I said lightly. "It just feels like there's always something I'm missing lately." She watched me carefully. Too carefully. "Yes," she said slowly. "That can be a sign of mental overload. Mental overload." I nodded as if that made sense. Yes, I said, that must be it. She closed her magazine and leaned forward slightly. She said, her voice softer now. We've been thinking about ways to make things easier for you. I met her eyes. Easier? Yes, she said, less stress, more support. The words sounded kind, but the meaning beneath them was anything but. What do you mean? I asked. She hesitated just briefly. Nothing decided, she said, just options. Options. I smiled faintly. I'm sure you'll let me know, I said. Oh, of course, she replied quickly. Of course. That evening, Ryan came home later than usual. Dinner was quiet, tense but controlled. I kept my role. Softer, slower, just uncertain enough. Courtney watched, Ryan avoided, and I observed. But the moment that stayed with me didn't happen at the table. It happened later, after dinner. I was in the hallway when I heard Ethan's voice. Mommy said, "Why does Grandma forget things? Now I froze." Courtney's response came quickly. "Because she's getting older, sweetheart," she said gently. "It happens." "Will she get better?" he asked. There was a pause. A small one. "No," she said softly, "but we'll make sure she's taken care of." Taken care of. I closed my eyes. Not from pain, from understanding, because now it was clear. This wasn't just about money or documents or control. This was about replacing me, rewriting me, turning me into someone who couldn't be trusted with her own life, and they were already teaching my grandson to believe it. I walked back to my room slowly, my steps steady. Inside, I closed the door and sat down on the bed. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it. The sadness, the betrayal, the quiet aching loss of what I thought my family was. But then I opened my eyes and let it go. Because sadness wouldn't protect me, and it certainly wouldn't stop them. I reached into my purse and took out the notebook. I added another line. They are building a case. Then beneath it, so am I. And this time, I meant it completely. The footage came in 3 days later. I hadn't expected it to happen so quickly, but something in me must have known. Because when my phone buzzed that afternoon with a notification from the camera system, I didn't hesitate. I didn't panic. I simply stepped away from the kitchen, excused myself quietly, and went upstairs to the guest room. I closed the door, locked it, then sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the app. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My reflection stared back at me. Older, yes, but not confused, not lost. Not the version of me Courtney was trying so carefully to create. Then I pressed play. The timestamp read 11:42 a.m. That morning, I had told Courtney I was going to meet Gloria for lunch, which meant they thought the house was empty. The camera angle from the living room came into focus first. The front door opened, and there they were. Courtney walked in first, confident, unhurried, like she belonged there. Ryan followed behind her, closing the door carefully. Not loudly, not nervously, carefully. That detail mattered, because it meant he knew exactly what they were doing. My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. Courtney glanced around the room, her eyes scanning with quick precision. "See?" she said, her voice calm. "No one's been here." Ryan didn't respond right away. "This still feels wrong," he muttered. "Wrong." The word hung in the air for a moment. Courtney turned toward him, her expression sharpening slightly. "What feels wrong?" she asked, making sure things are handled before it's too late. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "She's my mother," he said, "and she won't be able to manage this much longer." Courtney replied, her tone firm but controlled. "You've seen it." The forgetfulness, the confusion that's not, Ryan started, then stopped. Even through the screen, I could see it, the hesitation, the crack, but Courtney didn't let it widen. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment," she said. "This is about responsibility. Responsibility, that word again. I felt something inside me harden, not into anger, but into clarity. Because now I could see exactly how she framed everything. Not manipulation, responsibility, not control, help. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Just, let's be quick," he said. Courtney nodded once. "Of course." They moved through the living room with purpose, not searching randomly, not exploring. They knew exactly where they were going. The hallway camera picked them up next. Courtney reached into her purse and pulled out a key. My key, or rather, a copy of it. Another detail, another confirmation. She unlocked the bedroom door and stepped inside. The third camera activated. From the corner of the room, I watched them enter my space. my sanctuary, my history. Courtney moved straight to the dresser. No hesitation, no uncertainty. She lifted the jewelry box, opened it, checked inside, then set it aside. Ryan stood near the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression tense. "Hurry up," he said. "I am," Courtney replied. She pulled open the top drawer, then the second, then the third. Efficient, methodical. Like she had done this before. Because she had. I leaned forward slightly, my breath slow controlled. Every second of this mattered. Every movement. Then she reached the file cabinet. My pulse quickened. She knelt down and pulled the drawer open. "Here," she said. Ryan stepped closer. She took out the property folder, opened it, flipped through the pages quickly. "No signature," she muttered. Ryan frowned. "Then what's the plan?" he asked. Courtney didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled another document from her bag. Folded, prepared. She placed it on top of my papers. "We move to phase 2, she said. My stomach tightened. "Phase 2. Ryan's voice dropped. "I don't like how that sounds." Courtney looked up at him, her expression calm, too calm. "It sounds necessary," she said. She tapped the document lightly. "If she won't sign willingly, we prove she shouldn't be signing anything at all." The words hit harder than anything else I had seen. Not because I hadn't suspected it, but because now it was real. Spoken. Clear. Ryan stared at the paper. "That's serious," he said. "Yes," Courtney replied. "It is." He hesitated again. "And if she fights it," he asked. Courtney's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "She won't," she said. "Not if everything is in place. Everything already in motion. Already prepared." I felt the weight of it settle into my chest, not as panic, but as understanding. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't reactive. This was planned, structured, layered. Ryan stepped back, shaking his head slightly. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. Courtney stood brushing her hands together as if finishing a simple task. "It only feels far because you waited too long to act," she said. "This should have been done months ago." Months. My grip tightened around the phone. Months. "How long have you been planning this?" Ryan asked quietly. Courtney didn't answer directly. "Long enough to know this is the right move," she said. "Right move." The room fell silent for a moment, then Ryan spoke again. "What about Ethan?" he asked. Courtney's expression softened slightly, but not in the way a mother's should. "He'll adjust," she said. "Kids always do. Adjust. To what?" To losing me, to believing I was incapable, to watching his grandmother disappear from his life under the name of care. Ryan didn't respond. He just stood there. And in that silence, I saw it clearly. He wasn't leading this, but he wasn't stopping it either. And that was enough. Courtney gathered the documents, placing everything back exactly as she had found it. Precise. Careful. As if nothing had ever been touched. Then she turned toward the door. "Let's go," she said. Ryan lingered for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. For a second, I thought he might say something, do something, but he didn't. He just followed her out. The door closed. The footage ended. And the room around me fell silent. I lowered the phone slowly, my hands steady, despite everything I had just seen. There it was. Proof. Not suspicion. Not interpretation. Proof. They had entered my home, searched my belongings, planned to take control of my property, and worse, planned to declare me unfit to stop them. I sat there for a long moment staring at nothing. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was recalibrating. Because now everything had changed. Before I had questions. Now I had answers. Before I had doubt. Now I had certainty. And with certainty came something else. Not anger, not revenge. Something quieter, something stronger. Resolve. I reached for my notebook and opened it. My pen hovered for a moment before touching the page. Then I wrote, "They are no longer pretending. Beneath it, neither am I." I closed the notebook gently and set it aside. Then I picked up my phone again. This time I didn't open the footage. I opened my contacts and I scrolled until I found the name I needed. Michael Grant. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said. "Everything all right?" I took a slow breath. "No," I said. Then I paused. "But now, I have what we need." Silence. "Then tell me," he said. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was trying to explain something uncertain. I was reporting something real, because whatever they thought they were building, it had just been exposed. And this time, they weren't the ones in control anymore. I didn't play the footage for Michael over the phone. Not yet. There are moments in life when you realize that what you're holding is too important to rush. Evidence like that, clear, undeniable, and devastating, needed to be handled carefully. Not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. I'd prefer to show you in person, I told him. There was a pause on the other end. That's wise, Michael said. Can you come in this afternoon? Yes, I replied. I'll be there. I hung up and sat still for a moment, letting everything settle into place. This was no longer about suspicion. This was no longer about trying to understand. This was about action, but not reckless action. Measured, precise, the kind that couldn't be undone. When I left the house later that afternoon, I told Courtney I was going to church. She didn't question it. Of course she didn't. Church was predictable, safe, a place where people like me went when we needed comfort. Not when we were preparing to dismantle a carefully constructed lie. Michael's office felt different this time, not unfamiliar, but more purposeful. When I sat across from him and placed my phone on the desk, I didn't say much. I simply opened the video and pressed play. He watched in silence, from the moment the door opened to the final frame. He didn't interrupt, didn't react visibly, but I saw it, the shift in his eyes as the conversation unfolded, the tightening of his jaw when Courtney said the words, "If she won't sign willingly, we prove she shouldn't be signing anything at all." When the video ended, the room was quiet. Michael leaned back slowly, exhaling. That, he said, is exactly what we needed. I nodded. I thought so. He folded his hands on the desk, his expression focused now. This establishes unauthorized entry, intent to access documents, and clear discussion of coercive legal strategy, he said. It's significant. Is it enough, I asked. It's strong, he replied. Very strong. But we don't stop here. Of course not. What comes next, I asked. He reached for a folder and opened it. We move on multiple fronts, he said. First, your legal protections. He began outlining them one by one. Your will needs to be updated immediately, he said. If anything happens, we ensure your assets go exactly where you want them to, without interference. I nodded. I don't want anything left vulnerable. Good, he said. Second, your power of attorney and medical directives. My chest tightened slightly. They were already asking about those, I said. I know he replied, which is why we changed them now. Completely. No ambiguity. Who would be listed, I asked. He met my eyes. Someone you trust, he said. I thought for a moment. Then I said quietly, Gloria. He nodded. That's a good choice. Third, he continued, we formally document what you've experienced. I've been writing everything down, I said, reaching into my purse and handing him the notebook. He flipped through it, his expression growing more serious with each page. This is excellent, he said, detailed, consistent, exactly what we need. Relief flickered through me, because for the first time, someone was confirming that I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't overreacting. I was responding appropriately. And finally, he said, closing the notebook, we prepare for confrontation. I felt my shoulders stiffen slightly. Confrontation, I repeated. Yes, he said, but not the kind you're thinking of. I waited. We don't accuse them privately, he said. We don't give them a chance to deny, manipulate, or reframe the narrative. Then how I asked. We control the setting, he said, the timing, and the audience. The word audience lingered. You mean, publicly, I asked. Strategically, he corrected. In a setting where their behavior can't be twisted into your instability. My mind immediately went to one place, the upcoming gathering, Ethan's birthday. They're planning something at the party, I said. Michael looked at me. What makes you think that Courtney has a folder, I said. She's been laying the groundwork telling people I'm forgetful, confused. His expression sharpened. Then that's where we meet them, he said. My pulse quickened. Are you sure I asked? He held my gaze steadily. If she intends to build a public narrative, he said we let her. I frowned slightly. And then he said calmly, we dismantle it. Silence settled between us. Not heavy, not uncertain, focused. Because this wasn't just about proving something, it was about timing, letting them step far enough into their own story that they couldn't step back out. I nodded slowly. I understand, I said. Good, he replied. In the meantime, you continue exactly as you have been. Observing, I said, and documenting, he added, and pretending I finished. He gave a small approving nod. Yes, he said, that too. When I left his office, I didn't feel shaken. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt prepared, because now everything had structure. Every step had purpose. Every move had direction. And most importantly, I wasn't alone in this anymore. That evening, I returned to Ryan's house just as the sun was beginning to set. The light spilled through the windows in warm tones, making everything look softer than it really was. Courtney was in the kitchen again. Of course. She always positioned herself at the center of the house. "Back already?" she asked, glancing at the clock. "Yes," I said. It was a short visit. She smiled faintly. "Good. You shouldn't be out too long." "Shouldn't." I nodded. "I agree." Ryan came in a few minutes later, his tie loosened, his expression tired. "How was the church?" he asked. I looked at him, and for a brief moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who used to run into my arms after school. The one who trusted me completely. It was clarifying, I said. He blinked slightly, as if he didn't quite understand. "Good," he said. Dinner that night was quiet, controlled. But something had shifted. Not in them, in me. Because I was no longer reacting to what they did. I was watching it unfold, waiting, allowing. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the footage in my mind, not to relive it, but to understand it. Every word, every pause, every hesitation in Ryan's voice. Because somewhere in all of this, there was still a question. Not about Courtney. I understood her clearly now, but Ryan, how far would he go? And more importantly, when the moment came, would he stand with her? Or would he finally face what he had become? I didn't know, but I did know one thing. The next time we stood in the same room, it wouldn't be as mother and son. It would be as truth, and the people who tried to bury it. And this time, I was ready. The morning of Ethan's birthday arrived with a kind of brightness that felt almost deliberate. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, catching on the polished counters and the carefully arranged decorations Courtney had spent 2 days perfecting. Blue and silver balloons lined the hallway. A banner stretched across the living room wall. "Happy 9th birthday. Ethan." Each letter spaced with exact precision. Everything looked flawless. Of course it did. Courtney didn't just plan events, she staged them. And today I realized wasn't just about celebrating Ethan. It was about presentation, narrative, position. I moved slowly that morning, just as I had been doing all week. Measured, soft, careful not to disrupt the image Courtney had been building. "You should wear something lighter," she said when she saw me come downstairs in a simple navy dress. "It's a cheerful occasion." I paused, glancing down at myself as if reconsidering. "Oh, do you think this is too dark?" I asked. She tilted her head, studying me. "It's not inappropriate," she said. "Just not very festive." I gave a small, uncertain smile. "I didn't think about that," I said. She stepped closer, her tone gentler now. "I have something you can borrow," she said. "It would brighten things up. Brighten things up." I nodded. That would be nice. She seemed pleased. Of course she did. Because every small moment like that reinforced the role she wanted me to play. Dependent, uncertain, in need of guidance. Ryan watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. He didn't intervene. He didn't question. He simply observed. Just as I had learned to do. By early afternoon, the house was filled with movement. Guests began arriving, neighbors, friends from church, a few of Ryan's co-workers and parents of Ethan's classmates. Laughter filled the space. Conversations overlapped. Children ran through the halls, their energy bright and unfiltered. And at the center of it all was Courtney, smiling, welcoming, effortlessly in control. "Leah, this is Mrs. Henderson," she said at one point, guiding me toward a woman I vaguely recognized. "She's Ethan's teacher." "Oh yes," I said, offering a warm smile. "It's so nice to meet you." Mrs. Henderson smiled kindly. "Ethan talks about you," she said. "He says you read to him all the time." My heart softened slightly. "I try to," I said. Courtney let out a light laugh. "Yes, Leah has a lot of time for that now," she said. "It's one of the perks of retirement." The words were harmless on the surface, but there was something beneath them. A subtle framing, a quiet repositioning. I felt it. But I didn't react. I simply smiled. "Children deserve stories," I said. Mrs. Henderson nodded. "They do," she agreed. Courtney's smile tightened just slightly. Another small moment, another quiet shift. As the afternoon went on, I noticed the pattern more clearly. Courtney moved through the room like a conductor guiding conversations, shaping impressions. And every so often, my dear, she would mention me. Not directly, not harshly, but strategically. She's been a little forgetful lately, she said to one guest, her tone laced with concern. We're keeping an eye on things. To another, it's just part of getting older, I suppose. We're trying to make things easier for her. Make things easier. There it was again. The language of care. Used to mask something else entirely. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't hear it, but because I did. And I understood what it meant. Ryan stayed close to the edges of the room, not quite involved, not quite distant, watching, always watching. At one point, our eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, everything else faded. And I saw it again. That flicker, that hesitation. But he looked away first. Of course he did. The party moved outside as the afternoon warmed. Tables had been set up in the backyard, covered in clean white cloths. The cake sat at the center, a carefully decorated design with Ethan's favorite colors. Everything was perfect, controlled, until it wasn't. It happened quickly. The kind of moment that seems small at first, but shifts everything. Ethan had been playing with a group of children near the fence when something upset him. I didn't see exactly what happened, just the aftermath. His face crumpled, his shoulders tensed, and then he stepped away from the group, his eyes searching, looking for someone, looking for me. It was instinct, the same instinct that had guided him since he was a toddler. "Grandma," he said softly. I moved toward him without thinking. "Hey," I said, gently kneeling slightly so I was at his level. "What happened?" Before he could answer, Courtney's voice cut through the moment. "Ethan, come here," she said sharply. He hesitated. Just for a second, then looked back at me. I placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "It's okay," I said softly. "You can tell me don't." The word was sharp, cold, final. I looked up. Courtney was already moving toward us, her expression tight. I said, "Come here." She repeated, her voice lower now, but no less firm. Ethan stepped back, confusion flickering across his face. He started. And that's when it happened. The moment everything broke. Courtney turned to me, her eyes hard, her voice cutting through the warm afternoon air like glass. "Don't talk to that old hag." The words rang out louder than she intended, or maybe exactly as loud as she intended, because the yard went silent. Conversation stopped, laughter faded, every head turned, every eye fixed on us. For a split second, time held still. I felt it all at once, the weight of their stares, the echo of her words, the familiar pull to shrink, to disappear, to let it pass. That's what I had done before. That's what she expected. But this time, I didn't. I stood there very still, very calm, and I looked at her, not with anger, not with shock, but with something she hadn't prepared for. Certainty. Courtney's expression flickered just slightly, because something in my stillness didn't match the role she had assigned me. I reached into my purse, slowly, deliberately. The movement alone was enough to draw more attention. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tightening. I didn't answer. I pulled out my phone. Ryan stepped forward slightly. "Mom," he started. I raised a hand, not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to stop him. Then I dialed. The silence deepened as the call connected. "This is Officer Dana Brooks speaking," a voice answered. I held the phone steadily. "My name is Leah Mitchell," I said clearly. "I need to report unlawful entry into my home and attempted document tampering." A ripple moved through the crowd. Courtney let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh my God," she said. "Are you serious right now?" I didn't look at her. I stayed focused. "Yes," I continued into the phone. "I have evidence." Ryan's face had gone pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. I turned to him then, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a man who had made choices and would now have to face them. "What I should have done sooner," I said quietly. Courtney stepped forward, her composure cracking. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." The words landed exactly as she intended. In front of witnesses, framing me, positioning me, but it was too late, because this time, I wasn't the only one who would be heard. I ended the call slowly, then I slipped the phone back into my purse, and I stood there, still, steady, waiting. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The silence after I ended the call felt heavier than anything that had come before it. It wasn't just quiet, it was charged. Every guest in that backyard stood frozen between curiosity and discomfort, unsure whether to stay or step away, whether they were witnessing something private or something that was about to become very public. Courtney was the first to move. Of course she was. She let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head as if she had just witnessed something mildly embarrassing rather than deeply serious. "This is unbelievable," she said, looking around at the guests. "I'm so sorry about this, everyone. She's just having one of her moments." There it was, her narrative, delivered smoothly, confidently, exactly as planned. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances. No one spoke. Ryan stepped closer to me, his voice low. "Mom, you need to stop," he said. "This isn't the way to handle this." I turned to him slowly. "No," I said calmly. "This is exactly the way." His jaw tightened. "You're making a scene," he said. I held his gaze. "No," I replied. "I'm ending one." That seemed to hit him harder than anything else. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Courtney stepped forward, placing herself slightly between us, as if positioning herself as the reasonable one. "Leah," she said, her tone softening, shifting into something almost soothing. "Why don't we go inside and talk about this privately, where there would be no witnesses, where the story could be reshaped?" I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "We'll stay right here." Her eyes flickered. Just briefly, but I saw it, a crack. "What you're doing is inappropriate," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "Calling the police over. What a misunderstanding." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked around, at the faces watching us, at the people she had carefully prepared as her audience. Then I spoke. "It's not about what you said," I said clearly. "It's about what you've been doing." A murmur moved through the crowd. Courtney's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "You do." Ryan stepped in again, more urgently now. "Mom, stop," he said. "You're not thinking clearly." I turned to him. "Is that what you believe I asked?" He hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything was revealed. Courtney recovered quickly. "This is exactly what I was telling you," she said to the nearest guests, lowering her voice just enough to sound concerned. "She's been confused lately. We've been trying to manage it quietly, but... The implication hung in the air. I could see it working, the doubt, the uncertainty, because people want to believe what is easier, what is more comfortable. And the idea that I was confused was far easier than the truth. But Courtney had made one mistake. She assumed I would react emotionally, that I would raise my voice, that I would confirm her version simply by resisting it. Instead, I stayed calm. "Courtney," I said evenly, "would you like to explain why you entered my home without permission?" The shift was immediate, not dramatic, but undeniable. A ripple of tension passed through the group. Courtney blinked. Once, twice. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said. I nodded. "That's interesting," I replied. Ryan's voice came in quickly. "Mom, we didn't..." I held up my hand again. Not forcefully, just enough. "Don't," I said. He stopped. Courtney's composure began to tighten at the edges. "This is exactly what I mean," she said, turning slightly to the others. "She's making accusations that don't make any sense." I looked at her. Then I reached into my purse again. This time slowly, deliberately. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I have footage," I said. The words landed differently, heavier, more real. Courtney's expression changed. Not fully, but enough. Ryan went still. "What footage?" he asked, his voice tight. I met his eyes. "You know exactly what footage," I said. The color drained from his face. Courtney stepped forward, her voice sharper now. "That's not possible," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "No, I asked." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, because in that moment, she realized. She had miscalculated. The crowd shifted again, this time with a different energy. Not uncertainty, interest, concern. Leah Courtney said, her voice lower now. "Controlled, if you think you have something, we can discuss it privately." Again, privately. I almost admired her persistence, but I shook my head. "No," I said, "we won't." Ryan took a step back, running a hand over his face. "Mom," he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment I saw the conflict, the fear, The realization that whatever came next couldn't be undone. "You should have stopped this," I said softly. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. The sound of a car pulling up broke the moment. All heads turned. A police vehicle. Pulling into the driveway, right on time. Courtney straightened slightly, her composure snapping back into place. "Good," she said under her breath. "This will clear everything up. Clear everything up." I almost smiled. Officer Dana Brooks stepped out of the car, her presence calm but authoritative as she approached. "Good afternoon," she said, looking between us. "Who made the call?" "I did," I said, stepping forward. She nodded. "Ma'am, can you tell me what's going on?" Courtney moved quickly. "Officer, I'm so sorry," she said. "This is just a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law has been—" Officer Brooks raised a hand. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "I'll speak with her first." Courtney stopped, just like that. Because authority changes things. Officer Brooks turned back to me. "Go ahead," she said. I took a breath. Not because I was nervous, but because this was the moment everything aligned. "My name is Leah Mitchell," I said clearly. 3 days ago, I installed cameras in my home after noticing signs of unauthorized entry. I paused, letting the words settle. Yesterday, I continued those cameras, recorded my son and his wife entering my home without permission, searching through my personal documents, and discussing plans to take control of my property. The yard went completely still. No whispers, no movement, just silence. Officer Brooks' expression sharpened. "Do you have that footage?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Courtney stepped forward again, her voice rising. "This is absurd," she said. "You can't just believe," Ma'am. Officer Brooks said firmly. "You'll have a chance to speak." Courtney stopped, but this time, it wasn't controlled. It was forced. Ryan stood motionless, silent, trapped between the truth and the consequences. I handed my phone to the officer. "Everything is here," I said. She took it, her expression focused, and as she began to watch, I knew. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was exposure, and this time, there was no way out for them. No one spoke while Officer Brooks watched the video. Not a whisper, not a breath out of place. It was as if the entire backyard had been suspended in time, every person drawn into the small screen in her hands, even though only she could see it. But they didn't need to see it. They could feel it. The shift had already begun. I stood still, my hands folded calmly in front of me, my eyes not on Courtney, not on Ryan, but on the officer. Because at that moment, she was the only one who mattered. Courtney, on the other hand, couldn't stay still. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath, though loud enough for those nearest to hear. "She's twisting things. I don't know what she thinks she has, but ma'am." Officer Brooks didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. One word was enough. Courtney stopped, again. Ryan hadn't moved at all. He stood just a few feet away, his face pale. His eyes fixed somewhere on the ground, as if avoiding the truth might somehow delay it. It wouldn't. Nothing could now. Officer Brooks watched the video all the way through, every second, every word. When it ended, she didn't immediately look up. Instead, she replayed a portion of it, the part, the sentence. "If she won't sign willingly, we prove she shouldn't be signing anything at all." I saw her jaw tighten slightly. Then she lowered the phone and looked at me. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her tone measured but firm, "when did you install these cameras?" 3 days ago, I replied, after I noticed signs that someone had been in my home without my permission. She nodded. "And you did not give either of them access to your home during that time?" "No," I said, "I did not." She turned slowly, toward Courtney, toward Ryan, and in that moment, everything shifted. Because now, they were no longer controlling the narrative. They were responding to it. "Ma'am," Officer Brooks said, addressing Courtney directly, "did you enter Mrs. Mitchell's home yesterday?" Courtney let out a short breath, her composure snapping back into place like armor. "Yes," she said quickly, "but not in the way she's implying." Officer Brooks didn't react. "Then explain it," she said. Courtney straightened slightly, her voice smoothing out, regaining that practiced confidence. "We were checking on the property," she said. "Leah has been having some memory issues, and we were concerned about whether everything was being maintained properly. Concerned. Responsible. Careful language. Ryan shifted slightly beside her. "We weren't trying to do anything wrong," he added quickly. "We were just making sure things were okay." Officer Brooks' gaze moved between them. "Did you have permission to enter the home?" she asked. Courtney hesitated. "Just for a second." "Then we have a key," she said. "That wasn't my question," the officer replied. The difference was subtle, but sharp. Courtney's lips pressed together. "No," she said finally, not explicitly. A murmur rippled through the guests, small but undeniable. Officer Brooks nodded once. "And the documents you were reviewing," she continued, "what was the purpose of that?" Courtney's composure wavered again. "We were organizing," she said, "preparing things in case what?" the officer asked. Courtney's eyes flickered. Ryan stepped in. "In case something happens to her," he said quickly. "We were trying to help. Help." I almost recognized the word anymore. Officer Brooks held his gaze. "By discussing legal competency?" she asked. Ryan froze. Courtney turned sharply toward him, but it was too late. Because now, the pieces were connecting. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Courtney said quickly. "We were only talking hypothetically." "I don't deal in hypotheticals," Officer Brooks said calmly. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Because now the truth wasn't just implied, it was unfolding, right in front of everyone. I saw it in their faces, the guests, the neighbors, the people Courtney had carefully curated as her audience. They weren't uncertain anymore. They were watching, learning, understanding. Courtney's voice rose slightly, just enough to edge toward frustration. "This is being blown completely out of proportion," she said. "We're family. These are private matters." Private. Again. Always trying to contain it, to control where the truth could exist. But Officer Brooks didn't shift. "Ma'am," she said, "entering someone's home without permission and accessing their personal documents is not a private matter." That landed hard. Courtney blinked. Ryan looked like he might be sick. "And based on what I've just seen," the officer continued, "there may be additional concerns regarding intent." Intent. That word changed everything, because it wasn't about what they had done. It was about why they had done it. Courtney took a step forward, her voice tightening. "You can't seriously think. I don't need to think." Officer Brooks interrupted gently. "I need to follow what's in front of me." And what was in front of her was undeniable. I stood there quiet, steady, not triumphant, not angry, just present. Because this wasn't about winning, it was about truth. And truth doesn't need to shout. Officer Brooks turned back to me. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "I'm going to need a copy of this footage along with any documentation you have regarding previous incidents." "I have everything prepared," I said. Courtney's head snapped toward me. Everything. That word hit her harder than anything else. "What do you mean, everything?" she asked, her voice sharp now. I met her eyes, calmly. I said this didn't start yesterday. The silence that followed was different, deeper, because now she understood. This wasn't a sudden reaction. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't emotion. It was preparation, and she hadn't seen it coming. Ryan stepped back, running both hands over his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. Courtney turned to him. "Don't," she snapped under her breath. "Not now." But it was too late, because the structure she had built was cracking, and she could feel it. Officer Brooks straightened. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "I'm going to document this as a formal incident. Depending on what's verified, this may proceed further." Courtney's voice sharpened again. "This is insane," she said. "You're taking her word over ours." The officer looked at her. "No," she said calmly. "I'm taking evidence." That ended it. Right there. No argument, no spin, no performance, just reality. Courtney fell silent, for the first time since I had known her. Truly silent. Ryan didn't speak either, because there was nothing left to say. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a backyard that had been so carefully arranged to showcase control, everything had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely, because the truth had stepped into the room, and this time, no one could ignore it. The party never truly recovered after that. People didn't leave all at once. There was no dramatic exodus, no loud goodbyes. But the energy shifted. Conversations resumed in fragments, quiet, cautious, no longer warm. Parents gathered their children earlier than expected. Plates were cleared before they were finished. Laughter, when it came, felt forced. And Courtney. She tried. I'll give her that. She tried to hold it together. "Let's just focus on Ethan," she said at one point, her voice carefully light as she cut the cake. It's his day. But even Ethan could feel it. Children always do. He smiled when people sang, blew out his candles, and opened his gifts, but his eyes kept drifting. Toward me, toward his parents, toward the space where something invisible had broken. I stayed where I was, not hiding, not retreating, just present. Because this wasn't a moment I needed to escape. It was one I needed to witness. By the time the last guest left, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The decorations still hung in place. The tables still stood. But everything felt hollow. Ryan was the first to speak. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice strained, like he was trying to hold something together that had already come apart. I turned to him. "You already know," I said. He shook his head. "No," he said. "No, I don't think I do. Because this," he gestured vaguely around him, "this isn't what we were trying to do." I held his gaze. "Then what were you trying to do?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. Courtney stepped in. "Don't answer that," she said sharply. He looked at her. "Why not?" he asked. "Because this isn't the time," she replied. "We need to think. Think, plan, control, the same pattern." But something had changed. Ryan straightened slightly. "No," he said quietly. "I think this is exactly the time." Courtney's expression hardened. "Ryan, how long?" he interrupted. The question landed like a stone. She froze. "What?" she asked. "How long have you been planning this?" He said, his voice low but steady now. Silence. Not the kind filled with confusion. The kind filled with truth, waiting to be acknowledged. Courtney's eyes flicked toward me briefly, then back to him. "That's not a fair question," she said. "Yes, it is." He replied. "No, it's not," she insisted, "because you were part of this." That stopped him, and for a moment, the balance shifted again. Ryan's shoulders tensed. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. Courtney let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You didn't know," she said. "Ryan, you were there. I thought we were just organizing things," he said, "making sure everything was handled." "That's exactly what we were doing," she replied. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not what that was." He turned to me then, and for the first time since this began, he didn't look away. "I didn't know you were planning to declare her incompetent," he said. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Courtney's voice sharpened. "Don't say it like that," she snapped. Like what he shot back. Like it's true. She stepped closer, her composure cracking at the edges. "It is true," she said, "and it's necessary." "Necessary," he repeated, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Yes," she said firmly, "because she can't manage everything on her own anymore, and you know it." I felt something twist inside me. Not because of the accusation, but because of how easily she said it, as if it were fact, as if I weren't standing right there. Ryan shook his head again. "No," he said. "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" she challenged. He hesitated. "Just for a second, then money," he said. The word landed harder than anything else. Courtney's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "That's not fair," she said. "It is," he replied, "because that's what this started as." He turned back to me. And this time, there was no hesitation. "No matter how you dress it up," he said quietly, "it's about the house, the accounts, everything." Courtney's voice dropped, cold, controlled. "We have debts, Ryan," she said, "real ones, and that house is just sitting there, as if it were nothing, as if it didn't hold a lifetime." He rubbed his face again, his voice cracking slightly. "So we take it," he said. "That's the solution. We manage it," she corrected. "We make sure it's used properly." "By taking control away from her?" he asked. "She won't even know the difference," Courtney said. That was the moment. The one that broke something final. Not in me, in him. Ryan stared at her, and whatever doubt had been holding him back collapsed. "She would know," he said quietly. Courtney didn't respond. Because she couldn't. Because deep down, she knew it too. I stood there listening, watching, absorbing, not as a victim, not as someone waiting to be defended, but as someone finally seeing the full truth laid bare. Ryan turned to me again. "I'm sorry," he said. 2 words. Too late. Too small. But real. "I didn't think—" He started, then stopped. I held up a hand gently. "Don't," I said. He fell silent, because there was nothing he could say that would undo what had already been done. Courtney crossed her arms, her expression hard now. "So what?" she said. "You're just going to turn on me now." Ryan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her, really looked at her, and I could see it. The realization, the distance, the understanding that whatever they had built together was not what he thought it was. "I'm not turning on you," he said slowly. "I'm stepping back." The words hit her like a slap. "You don't get to step back," she snapped. "You're already in this," he nodded. "I know," he said. "That's the problem." Silence settled over the yard again, but this time, it wasn't tense. It was clear, because everything that had been hidden was now visible, and there was no putting it back. I looked at Ryan, at the man he had become, and at the boy I once knew. "You made your choices," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know," and now I continued. "You'll live with them." Courtney let out a sharp breath. "This isn't over," she said. I met her eyes. "No," I said calmly, "it's not. Because this wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what came next." And for the first time, that wasn't something she controlled anymore. The house felt unfamiliar that night, not because anything had physically changed, but because everything had. The decorations were still up. The dishes were still stacked in the sink. The faint smell of frosting and candles lingered in the air. But the illusion, the carefully constructed version of family that Courtney had curated so perfectly, was gone. Ryan stayed in the living room long after the sun had set. I could hear him pacing, back and forth, slow, restless, like a man trying to outrun a truth that kept catching up to him. Courtney, on the other hand, retreated quickly. She didn't slam doors, she didn't raise her voice, but the silence she left behind was louder than anything she could have said. I went upstairs without speaking, not because I was avoiding them, but because I had already said everything that mattered. Inside the guest room, I closed the door gently and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to feel it fully. Not the anger, not even the betrayal, but the loss. Because no matter how strong I had been, no matter how prepared, this was still my son. And somewhere along the way, I had lost him. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because the tears felt finished. Like they belonged to a version of me that had already passed. Instead, I sat there in the quiet and let the truth settle. By morning, the house was different. Quieter, heavier. Ryan was already awake when I came downstairs. He stood near the kitchen counter, a cup of coffee in his hand, though it didn't look like he had taken a single sip. "Mom," he said when he saw me. I nodded. "Ryan." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. No noise, no distractions, just the space between us. "I didn't sleep," he said finally. "I know," I replied. He let out a breath, setting the cup down. "I keep replaying it," he said. "Everything, the video, what she said, what I said." I didn't respond, because this wasn't about comforting him. This was about accountability. "I thought I was helping," he continued. "At least at first. I told myself it was about making things easier for you, making sure everything was organized. The word sounded hollow now, but it wasn't," he said, shaking his head. "Not really." "No," I said quietly. "It wasn't." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, there was no distance, just truth. "We're in debt," he said. I didn't react, because I had already suspected. How much I asked. He hesitated. "More than I should have allowed," he admitted. "Credit cards, a failed investment, things I didn't tell you about." "Why not?" I asked. He let out a small, bitter laugh. "Because I didn't want you to see me like that," he said. "Like I couldn't handle my own life." I studied him. "You mean the way you've been trying to make me look?" I asked. The words landed. He flinched. "I didn't—" He started, then stopped, because there was no way to finish that sentence honestly. "I didn't think of it like that," he said finally. "I know," I replied, and I did. That was the hardest part. He hadn't set out to hurt me. He had just allowed it to happen. Slowly. Quietly. Until it became something he couldn't step away from. Courtney said it was temporary, he continued. That we would just manage things until everything was stable again, and you believed that I asked. He nodded. At first, he said, but then it kept shifting. Of course it did, because plans like that always do. They needed more control, he said, more access, more justification. And you gave it to her, I said. He lowered his head. Yes. Silence settled between us again, not heavy, just real. What happens now, he asked. I took a slow breath. You face the consequences, I said. He nodded. I figured you'd say that. This isn't about punishing you, I continued. It's about protecting myself. He looked up. I understand. And for the first time, I believed him. Not because he said the right words, but because he wasn't trying to avoid them anymore. Courtney didn't come downstairs until much later. When she did, she looked exactly the same as she always had. Composed, put together, controlled, but there was something missing. Not confidence, not entirely, but certainty. She stopped when she saw us standing there. Are we going to pretend nothing happened, she asked. No, I said calmly. Good, she replied, because I'm not going to sit here and let this spiral into something it doesn't need to be. I held her gaze. It already has, I said. She crossed her arms. This is still a family matter, she said. We can handle it without turning it into something legal. No, I replied. We can't. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're really going through with this, she said. Yes, I said. Ryan didn't speak, but he didn't defend her either. That mattered more than anything he could have said. Courtney looked at him. You're just going to stand there, she asked. He didn't hesitate this time. Yes, he said quietly. Something in her expression shifted. Not anger, something colder. Fine, she said. Then don't expect me to protect you when this falls apart. It already has, he replied. She stared at him for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the room. No slammed door, no raised voice, just distance final. I watched her go and felt something unexpected. Not relief, not satisfaction, but clarity, because this was no longer about her. It was about what remained. Ryan stood there, his shoulders heavy, his eyes uncertain. What about Ethan, he asked. The question landed softly, but deeply, because that was the part that still mattered. He's a child, I said. He didn't choose any of this. Ryan nodded. I don't want him to lose you, he said. I looked at him. I'm not the one who made that a possibility, I replied. He swallowed. I know, and I won't punish him for your choices, I added. Relief flickered across his face. But things will be different, I said. He nodded again. I understand. And this time, I believe that too. Later that afternoon, I returned to my house. My house. Not just a place, not just a property, but mine. When I stepped inside, it still carried the quiet weight of what had happened, but it also held something else, something stronger. Ownership. Not just of the space, but of myself. I walked through each room, slowly taking it in. The bookshelf, the kitchen, the bedroom. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Because I had. I set my purse down and stood by the window, looking out at the street. For the first time in weeks, I felt still. Not empty, not broken, just steady. Because the truth had come out, the damage had been done, and now I could begin again. Not as someone who had been pushed aside, but as someone who had chosen to stand. The first night back in my own home was quieter than I expected. Not lonely, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't press against you but instead settles around you like something familiar you had almost forgotten. I stood in the kitchen for a long time that evening, my hands resting lightly on the counter, my eyes tracing the small details I used to move past without thinking. The chipped edge of the ceramic bowl David refused to throw away, the faint scratch on the wooden table where Ryan had carved his initials as a boy, the soft hum of the refrigerator steady, constant. Everything was still here, unchanged, untouched, and for the first time since I had left, so was I. Not the version of me Courtney had tried to create, not the quiet, uncertain woman she had framed so carefully, but the one who had always been here, the one who had simply needed to remember. I made myself a cup of tea that night, not because I needed it, but because I could, because no one was watching, no one was correcting, no one was quietly measuring what I did or how I did it, and something as simple as that felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke early, out of habit, out of peace. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in a way it never quite had at Ryan's house, softer, warmer, more forgiving. I sat by the window with my tea and let the day come slowly. There were still things ahead, legal matters, statements, decisions that would carry weight. But for that moment, I allowed myself to rest inside the quiet. Later that day, I met with Michael again, this time not as someone seeking guidance, but as someone moving forward. "We'll proceed carefully," he said, reviewing the documents we had prepared. "There may be charges depending on how things develop, but your position is strong." "I'm not interested in destroying them," I said. He looked at me. "I didn't think you were," he replied. "I just want to make sure this never happens again," I added. He nodded. "That's exactly what this will do." And that was enough. Not revenge, not punishment, protection, clarity, boundaries. When I returned home that afternoon, there was something waiting for me. An envelope, placed carefully on the front step. I knew who it was from before I even picked it up. Ryan. I held it in my hands for a moment before opening it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, the way he used to write when he was younger before everything became emails and quick messages. I unfolded it slowly. "Mom, I don't know where to start. There's nothing I can say that makes this right. I see that now. I see everything now. I thought I was fixing something. I thought I was protecting my family. But all I did was break the one person who never deserved it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I haven't earned that. I just want you to know I understand what I did and I'm going to face it, whatever that means. Ethan asks about you every day. I told him you still love him. I hope that's true. I'm sorry, Ryan." I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I needed to feel what it meant, not the words, but the intention behind them. He wasn't asking to be absolved. He wasn't trying to explain it away. For the first time, he was simply acknowledging it, and that mattered. Not enough to erase what had happened, but enough to change what came next. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. Then I walked over to the small desk near the window, sat down, and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I didn't rush, I didn't overthink, I simply wrote, "Ryan, I received your letter. You're right, there's nothing that makes this right. But understanding what you did is the first step toward making sure it never happens again. I won't pretend this didn't hurt. It did, in ways you may not fully understand yet. But I also won't let it define everything that comes after. Ethan is innocent in all of this. And yes, I still love him. That hasn't changed. It never will. As for you, time will show me who you choose to be from here. I'm not closing the door, but I'm not holding it open either. That part is up to you, Mom." I set the pen down and looked at the page for a moment. Then I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and set it aside. Not to be sent immediately, but when the time was right. Because boundaries are not just about distance, they're about intention. In the weeks that followed, life didn't return to what it had been, and I didn't expect it to. Because some things, once broken, don't go back to their original form. They become something else, something new, stronger in some places, more fragile in others. Courtney was gone from my life, not dramatically, not loudly, just completely. Ryan kept his distance, at first. Then slowly, carefully, he began to reach out. Short messages, simple updates, no expectations, just presence, and Ethan, he wrote letters. Small ones, with uneven handwriting and simple words. "I miss you. I hope you come visit. I saved a book for you. I kept every single one. And when I was ready, I wrote back. Not as someone who had been pushed aside, but as someone who had chosen her place, on her own terms." Months later, I found myself sitting in a small community room at the church. A group of women gathered around me, some older, some younger, all listening as I spoke. Not about everything, not about names or details, but about something deeper. Pay attention to the small things, I told them, the things that don't feel right, even if you can't explain why. They nodded. Because they understood. "Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter," I continued, "especially in your own life." And as I spoke, I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a warning, a reminder, a way to make sure someone else didn't stay silent when they shouldn't. That night, I returned home and stood by the window again. Just like I had on that first day back, the street was quiet, the world steady. And inside, so was I. Not untouched, not unchanged, but whole. Because in the end, they didn't take my home, they didn't take my voice, and they didn't take me. I kept all of it, and that was enough. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we trust to protect us. And the hardest part isn't always what they do. It's how slowly it happens, how it begins with small dismissals, small corrections, small moments where your voice is quietly pushed aside until one day you realize you're no longer being heard at all. But here's the truth many people don't say out loud: love does not require you to disappear. Family does not have the right to take your dignity in the name of help. And age does not make you invisible unless you allow others to treat you that way. If something feels wrong, it usually is. If someone is slowly taking control of your life, your choices, your voice, that is not care. That is control. And you have the right to stop it at any moment, in any way, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it changes everything. Because protecting yourself is not selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes, it's the only way to truly survive what others try to take from you. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something like this or witnessed it happen to someone you love? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you believe stories like this matter, please subscribe and stay with me. You're not alone in this.